first time I saw this 2003 Red Fire Terminator Cobra was on Craigslist. This car had quite the history. It was actually stolen at one point, and for that it received a salvage rebuilt title. The car was stolen, yet it was recovered quickly, and the thieves had only gotten away with a few things off the car. One of those things was the interior, and it really wasn't that bad. The thieves had stolen the seats out of the car, and that was it. So when I first saw this car, it had a set of 2001 Mustang Cobra seats. So they looked pretty similar to the 0304 Cobra seats, but they were different. They still had the snake on them and everything, but they were definitely 2001 Cobra seats. Another thing we were speculative of was that they might have gotten away with the side skirts, because later we found out that the side skirts were torch red underneath the paint, and so it might have had that done to it as well. But the good news about this car is, being a theft recovery car, it wasn't damaged in any way, it wasn't wrecked, it didn't have anything really wrong with it other than the fact that somebody had stolen it at one point. So we were all in agreement that it was actually a really nice car, and that with that theft recovery, all it really did was make the car a little bit cheaper. And so this car was actually purchased for around $10,000, and it only had 50,000 miles on it, so very nice. And so we were always surprised at how nice of a car it was, and always impressed with how nice of a car it was for the price especially. And looking back, I probably should have bought the car. A lot of us wish we would have bought it at that price. So my friend had a white Fox body with a cam, and it was a really nice car, and everybody knew it was a nice car, and he decided to go ahead and sell it so he could buy this Terminator Cobra. So he did, and he ended up buying this car, and we were always impressed at how nice this car was when we saw it in person. And so we were all very happy for my friend. He got a really good deal. He got a great car, and he did something kind of gutsy to buy a salvage rebuilt car like that. That you never know what has been done to it, but it was also a really good turnout. So we were very happy for him. So looking at the car, you'll notice it has a set of black bullet wheels with kind of the two-piece wheel look to it. And, they were alright, but that was the first thing that was changed on the car. One of the first things when my friend bought the car. And then the other thing was, he put it right on the dyno immediately to make sure that the car was tuned safe and that everything was good with it. And he got the car tuned and everything was great. And so he really wanted the Terminator seats back in the car, and so he put the '01 Cobra seats for sale. He was able to sell those '01 Cobra seats, and he got a nice set of Terminator seats for the car. So these are the graphite insert ones, and they're very nice, and he had them shipped across the country. He paid a lot of money for them, and that really made the car nice again. Now, something kind of interesting that I noticed about the car in this picture is the door latch area, the striker, or whatever it's called here. It's got two of those rubber mounts on it, and that bracket and rubber mount assembly, I believe, is for a convertible. So I don't know why that's been replaced, and maybe there's more to it, or maybe the car had accident history at one time and they had to fix that or replace it, or maybe they replaced it for some reason. Maybe that's where they broke into the car to steal it. You never know, but I did notice it had a convertible one on there, so that was interesting. And speaking of the interior, I believe he bought an OEM shift knob for the car. I'm pretty sure that he had a different one on there when he bought it, and he went to all the trouble to get a nice Terminator one on there, so that looked really good. And he added some gauges to the car. He had a boost gauge here, and then he had another set on the other side on the column with air-fuel ratio and volts for the battery. So he lived about 40 miles away, and he would come up to our town when we had this really cool race thing going on up at the old airport, and it was really fun to get together, and it was fun to see his car there, and it did really well. It looked really good in this picture. I always liked this picture of the car. And the only thing the car really had was just bolt-ons and a smaller upper pulley. I don't think it was a ported blower. People were wondering if it was because the car was so quick, but it ran about the right times it should for being what it was. It was in the 11s, and it was really fun to come up to these airport races. Something you'll notice about the car in this picture is that it's missing the passenger side headlight. And I was actually talking to someone today at a car show about this, and a lot of guys will take out the passenger headlight because that's right where the cold air intake cone sits, right behind the headlight. So it gets cold air through the opening where the headlight was, and it helps get colder air into the supercharger. So that's pretty cool, and you can notice that in this picture. And so here you can see the cars parked next to my friend's Oxford White Cobra. It was a really fun day to have all of our Cobras up there together and just be at the track. You can see my competition orange Cobra behind him and my brother's screaming yellow one. But this was a really fun day. He had traveled all the way up here to race, and they wanted to fail him at tech inspection for not having bolts to hold the battery tray in place. And so I just took the bolts out of my orange Cobra's battery tray and put them in for him. And he was really excited about that. And then he was complaining about how his shoes were too wide and they were messing up the pedals. And so I took off my brand new shoes and said, here, you try these out, see if this helps. And they were a little bit narrower, brand new pair of Nikes. And they were the right size and they fit him and everything, and everybody was laughing and he was laughing and he was really grateful. And my brother said to everybody, look at this guys, Justin will literally take the shoes off his feet to help a friend out. So check out how good this car ran. He was up there just taking names and beating car after car. He ran so well, and we were all proud of this car. So this Cobra really lived up to its name, and it was an awesome car. It was affordable. It ran just as good as any other Cobra would. You can see he had a set of LMR drag pack wheels. People call them poverty stars because they're inexpensive. I think that's funny. They look good on the car though. They're chrome. Chrome looked really good with the red fire. And so beautiful car, set up nicely, hooked, went right down the track, ran 11s. And so it was very impressive. This red GTO next to it was my friend's GTO, and it was a 6-liter car, LS2, and it was really nice. And he was really into racing, and I have high respect for this guy. He ran that car like crazy, and he was one of the faster cars in our group. And he had talked about what he thought about this Terminator Cobra, and he said he went for a ride in it and it just kept pulling, and it would go and it would just keep going, and you would think that it was going to run out of steam, but it would just keep picking up. And he was highly impressed with the car, and he said, my hat's off to you, that's a very fast car, very neat car. So they got these two cars together up there at the airport races, and the Terminator just walked away from the GTO, which it should do with the power level and everything it had. But it was very impressive and fun to watch that Terminator shine, especially since he bought the car and made sure it was safe to run, and then he just enjoyed it. So this is all of us out to lunch on race day. We went down the hill from the mountain where the racetrack was, and we went all out and got hamburgers and had a great time. And so here's the Terminator Cobras all together and the GTO. Fun group of Mustangs to be running around and enjoying race day. So I really enjoyed being up there. It was a really fun time, and that track has been taken away from us, so we can't do that anymore. So it was fun while it lasted. And so he wanted to continue to upgrade the car, and so he bought a 2.3 Whipple supercharger for it and installed that on the car. And in this picture you can see a better close-up of the grille on this car. It had one of those mesh grill covers that goes in front, and you have to drill holes into the bumper to make that fit. So that's something that was on the car as well, just to identify the car. Something that I saw in another yellow Cobra with only 5,000 miles on it, and I thought it was kind of a shame because you have to drill into the bumper to put that on there. But just this picture shows that a little bit. So anyway, he put on this Whipple supercharger, and he did a return fuel system, and he had Voodoo Racing in Vegas tune the car and work on the car, and they did a good job tuning it. But one thing they told them was, be careful, your alternator is failing and your pumps are not getting the voltage that they need, and so therefore they're not supplying the engine with the fuel it needs, and the car can lean out from that. And actually his alternator ended up dying. And so The owner of Voodoo Racing, Frank Yee, really good guy, really into racing and super into these cars, and he's built so many of them. He had an extra Terminator alternator hanging around, and he said, this is an old one, it's kind of intermittent, so it'll get you by, but you probably shouldn't be racing on it. So my brother and I took the blue Mach 1 down for a trip to the drag strip to go watch the races and have some fun. And we went and parked outside the gate, and because we weren't racing or anything that night. But as we went inside to where the stadium and the track and the staging lanes are, we saw my friend's Cobra sitting there. And so we went over and started talking with him, and he said he was having a problem with the intercooler pump, that it wasn't working, and that he could hear it, but the coolant wasn't cycling in the reservoir for the intercooler. And so we tried the trick where you blow really hard, cup your hands around the inlet, and you blow really hard and push an air bubble through it, and it worked. So now the intercooler pump was working, and he was saying that he had high IATs, but he wanted to make some passes on the track. But he was also talking to the guy who tuned the car and getting his advice, and he said, now you really shouldn't be here with that alternator, because that was only a temporary use kind of thing. I was just giving it to you to get by. And he was saying, oh no, it's okay, it's working for me pretty good, but yeah, I do need to get a new alternator. And so he made a couple passes, but they weren't that great, and so he decided to be done for the night. So when the racing was over, we went to leave, and we saw his Cobra parked out there again. So we got together and started talking, and he was saying something about driving home together, and we all wanted to, and so we were both headed up the highway the same way, and we had a couple other friends there. And so we said, well, let's all go to the gas station together, and then we'll get on the road. And so this is just leaving Las Vegas. There's a little gas station here, and you can see there's my friend's 2016 Camaro SS, which was a very fast car. He was in the Optima battery series with that car, doing very well, and unfortunately that car burned to the ground recently at a track event, and he had bought that car brand new. And I also have a video of my Cobra racing this car, and my Bullet was able to race that car as well too, so fun times. My Mach 1, the Terminator, and another friend's green GTO. And so we were all getting gas and hanging out, and we knew that my friend with the Terminator really wanted to race that GTO. Even though the car wasn't running properly, completely, he still wanted to get onto the freeway and do a pull with that GTO. And the guy in the GTO wanted to race too, but it was just kind of a rivalry thing. Just friendly amongst friends, but they all knew that one day that was going to go down with that race. And the GTO had an LS1 and it had a centrifugal supercharger, so it was turned up pretty good, and these guys were both way into racing. And so my friend was like, okay, on the way home I'm going to get him. I'm going to get next to him and we're going to do a pull. And we were all driving in a pack. There were, the two of them in front, and then I was behind the GTO, and my friend in the Camaro was behind the Terminator, and this is what happened. So here in slow motion you can see that the Cobra starts spitting out some smoke, and he's leaning it out is what's happening, and then right there he totally lost a piston, melted it, and oil is now going everywhere. Oil got all over the front of my friend's white Camaro, and now we are on the side of the road. So we all got out and we tried to figure out what was going on, and this was a double whammy. Not only did the Terminator melt a piston, but the GTO also blew up its engine as well. So neither car would run anymore. And so we opened the hood on the Cobra and we were trying to figure it out, and we took off the oil cap, and oil and smoke was coming out of it, and my friend with the GTO was like, wow, you got a lot of blow-by in here. and I can't remember if they tried to start the car and it just wouldn't run, or if it did, it was just blowing smoke like mad. And so we decided that both of the cars were pretty cooked, and it was cold. Now, my friend with the GTO was like, "Hey, we all got V8s here. Let's just pull each other home." And I was like, "Yeah, right. There's no way am I hooking up a rope to my Mach 1." I know in the old muscle car days, there's pictures of people towing, an old Challenger with another Challenger, or, some muscle car with another muscle car, but I'm definitely not going to do that with my Mach 1. And so we decided the best thing to do would be to go get a trailer. And so we did have one friend who had a trailer. And so what we needed to do was go an hour up the road to my friend's house who had the Cobra to get his truck, and then come back down about half an hour and get the trailer, because the guy with the trailer was between the two places, and then get the trailer down and tow the Cobra home first, and then we'd come back for the GTO. And the reason we had to do that was because we needed to get the Cobra to my house, because my friend with the Cobra lived in a HOA, homeowners association, and he was not allowed to work on his car at his house or in his garage or anything. So we were going to take the Cobra to my house, and then we come back for the GTO. And so we all went in the Mach 1, and my friend with the Camaro just went home, but my brother, me, and my friend with the Cobra took my Mach 1 up to the friend's house and got his truck. And this all took time. This started all about midnight, and by the time we switched the cars around, got the truck, went to the friend's house, got the trailer, came down, the sun was already starting to come up. It was like all night long it took to do all this, and it was freezing. This was February. And I actually had some hand warmers that I was using at the racetrack, and I left them with my friend in the GTO to keep warm with and watch the cars. And when we got back to him, he was like a popsicle. He was freezing. I felt so bad for him. And we got back, and the Cobra was actually parked behind the GTO in this picture. And so we put the truck and trailer this far ahead, and then we had to push the Cobra onto the highway with traffic coming, go around the GTO, and then push it up onto the trailer. And it was the only way to do it. And so it was really difficult. And these cars were coming quickly, and I was surprised there'd be nobody coming, and we'd all start to push, and all of a sudden there'd be a bunch of cars coming. I remember a big motorhome having to get over and just blaring its horn at us, and it took a lot longer to push the Cobra around the GTO and onto the trailer than we thought, and it wasn't the safest thing to do, but we were doing it as safely as we possibly could. And so we got the Cobra loaded up onto the trailer, and we got the car hauled back towards where my friend lived, because he lived about an hour away, and then another 40 minutes or so is where I live. So we actually ended up towing the Cobra to his town and then dropping it off at an old gas station. And that's where I had to continue home with my brother, and we left the Cobra there. And then they went back for the GTO and brought it home, because he lives in the same town as my friend. And then another friend went all the way down there with his white Ford diesel truck, and he picked up the Cobra and the trailer and brought them to my house where we could start to look at the car. And so I'd come out in the morning and I'd see this Terminator sitting in my backyard, and I was like, wow, that's a good looking car. Man, I should just keep it. I even offered, when we were on the side of the road, I said, I'll trade you for my Bullet right now, the way it is. And he's like, no. He's like, that's tempting, but no. So I went out there and washed the car and got it all cleaned up. And my brother would come over and we'd work on it a little bit. And my friend, living about 45 minutes away, couldn't really come up that much to help us, so it was just easier for my brother and me just to get started on it and do little things each day with it. So we put tape all over the fenders to make sure we didn't scratch them up or anything, got the hood off the car, and we started looking things over, and we thought, we better get a borescope down in that cylinder and look and see what we can find. And we could see some damage down there, some scarring on the cylinder wall, and the piston didn't look very happy. And so we talked with my friend, and he really couldn't travel up every day to visit us, and so my brother and I decided to offer to go ahead and just take the engine out for him and start working on the car. So my brother and I started pulling the supercharger off, and he made some really good videos. He has some videos on how to remove the engine out of a Mustang, and they're great YouTube videos. And so we did that, and he recorded every step along the way. And so we got the supercharger off the car and pulled it out over, and got it settled, and then we pulled the whole engine out of the car. And it was kind of difficult because the headers were in the way, the long tubes. And I know the brake master cylinder was a fight. And so here's my friend. He did come to help get the engine out of the car the night we actually got it out. And here's just some pictures of the engine coming out. And here's the valve cover with 11 of 02 on the date of the engine's build, because it's an 03 Cobra, early build. So here's the engine out of the car, and we got it disassembled and torn apart, and this is what we found. Yeah, slightly used. So this is my buddy's Terminator. Not mine. Luckily, look at that bad boy. So basically the engine was toast, and he was going to have to do a rebuild on it, and that's a lot of money, and he was at the point where he was trying to decide what he could do with the car. He wanted to rebuild it, and I was happy to let him keep it at my house as long as he needed to. But the problem was my house was for sale, and I did find a buyer, and I told him I'm sorry, but I really need to get the car out of there because I have to move now. And he was really nice about that and grateful, and said he'd get the car and take it down to his place and put it in the garage on a trailer, as long as nobody saw him push it into the garage, because the HOA was just very, very tight on that. And so he was going to take the car, and he didn't want to part it out. He wanted to fix it. But it's one of those things where over time he realized that his real only option was to sell it as a roller and cut his losses. And so he did have a Borla catback on the car that was kind of dirty and used, just normal. And he ended up selling that to my brother, and he did the wet sand and polishing to it like I had done to my catbacks. And so he made some videos on how to do that. And I'm surprised at how nice that turned out. Look how good that can look, going from what it looks like to what it is now. So you can see each side. So basically at this point my friend decided it would be better to sell the car as a roller, and that's what ended up happening. And so he came and got the car from my house, and he had it for a little while, and I kind of wondered what happened to it. And then he had told me that he did sell the car. And so a year or two later I saw the car listed for sale, and I could tell it's definitely the same car. It has the Voodoo Racing banner on it. It has the ugly grille on the front. It has the black Terminator wheels that he had put on the car, smoked headlights, the yellow fog lights, everything. The Cobra seats, of course. I mean, that would be hard to tell, but looking at the back, he had a larger SVT badge on the trunk lid. Kind of hard to see, but it was there. And so whoever bought the car had actually bought a drivetrain for the car. So here is a Terminator engine with a ported Eaton supercharger, Stegmeyer. And if you look, you see those lines going into the front drive of the supercharger. And that's called the Venom Cooler mod. And Stegmeyer actually installs those on the front drives. And so I assume whoever bought this dropout engine for this Terminator had that Eaton, had that whole setup, and they put that on there. Maybe they bought it that way, but it's pretty cool. It's something that helps cool down the snout on the blower, keeps the temperatures down, and it uses the cooling system of the intercooler to do that. So pretty cool to see that. I've actually talked to Stegmeyer on the phone when I had the Bullet getting tuned, and I talked to him. He was a really nice guy to talk to, really knowledgeable, and he took time to explain everything to me about how much boost my car should be making with the Stage 4 blower that he had ported with his company. And he was just really nice to talk to, and spent plenty of time with me on the phone, and just any detail I wanted to know. So I'll have to give him some credit there. And so you can see it has a Dragon elbow on there, and a ported Eaton and some things. So I'm pretty sure this is a dropout engine that they had got somewhere, because I know some of those engine parts were still at my house when this all was done. And so looking inside the car, you can see the gauges, everything he had set up is still there, and the car had 52,000 miles on it. So pretty nice, still low mile car and everything. Cool to see it back on the road. I'm glad that somebody saved this car and put it back together instead of parting it out, because it would have been easy to part it out with a salvage title and all that. But awesome car, glad it's saved, glad it's back on the road. So if anybody knows about the car, or if you own this car, you can put that in the comments. But thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed this story, and stay tuned for more Mustang content.